5 orders of magnitude or 6 orders of magnitude away. Quantum computing can't solve every problem. It's good at small data, big combinatorial computing problems. It's not good at large data problems. It's good at small data problems. And the reason for that is because the way you communicate with a quantum computer is microwaves. There are some very, very interesting problems that you could use quantum computers for. Truly generating a random number, cryptography. So these are problems that are small data, big compute. In the case of quantum computing, it turns out that you need a classical computer to do error correction with the quantum computer. And that classical computer better be the fastest computer that humanity can build. We are the perfect company to be the classical part of classical quantum. And so we working with, just about every quantum computing company in the world is working with us now. We're probably somewhere between, in terms of the number of qubits, order of 5 orders of magnitude or 6 orders of magnitude away. And so if you kind of said 15.
Just to be clear, he says we need 1,000,000 times more qubits than we have now. So IonQ doing 100 qubits, 5 orders of magnitude, 6 orders of magnitude, that means 6 more zeros. So we got 100 qubits now. We need 100 million qubits. We might get that Christmas Eve, I would say. Christmas Eve 2053.
Years for very useful quantum computers. That would probably be on the.
Yeah, it's Jover. It's not over. It's Jover. There's a great company. You could buy Santa instead. They cure type 1 diabetes. What are you waiting for? Why own quantum? That's 20 years away. You heard Jensen? You heard him? He said 20 years. 20 years. Santa just did today. Type 1 diabetes. That's the kind you're born with. That's a big market.
Order partially filled.
I'm buying it right now. Oh, you got to free up some capital to buy Santa? Oh, I hate when that happens. You know what you can do? You can wire transfer some money in. Oh, you know what? Don't do that. Don't do that. Hold on. What you can do is sell all the other stocks in your portfolio and buy SANA. They just cured type 1 diabetes, bruh. You don't need quantum computing. It's all mumbo jumbo. Buy the Santa. Type 1 diabetes, not type 2. Type 2 is Ozempic and exercise. You might want to sell a little Rigetti, sell a little NVIDIA, sell a little DJT. Just not to pick some stocks at random, but just sell whatever's in your portfolio. And go ahead and buy the new type 1 diabetes cure. It's a big deal. You know how hard, how much pain I had to go through? I used to pray for times like this. My whole family was going to do an intervention. Martin, you've really lost it this time. Quantum is the future. You're just a hater. Even the cat looked at me like, then I see my brother in the corner. He's got a whole Rigetti t-shirt. Where'd you get that? He just looks away in disgust. All my coworkers sitting there writing quantum code. So what happened? What are you doing? We're supposed to make Godel.
Partially filled.
Godel is a financial information terminal.
Order filled.
That's what our investors invested in. And the programmers are like, I don't care. I'm going to write this QuizKit code. The guy's name's Chad Rigetti. He quit. Chad would be a billionaire right now. Yeah, look, Santa, there's many companies on one hand that have this type 1 diabetes technology. On the other hand, this is probably going to be on Good Morning America tomorrow, where everyone's going to say, wow, they cured type 1 diabetes, and we're in this crazy bull market where Fartcoin is worth $1 billion. You're telling me this company has a cure for type 1 diabetes and it's worth as much as Fartcoin? Oh, that's a good tweet. That's a good tweet. That's a good tweet. This is Jensen taking a baseball bat to a dilution refrigerator. That's awesome. What is this? Why is it going down like that? I bought the quantum. I heard them varmints in superposition. I ran over this raccoon. He ain't no superposition. We observed his state. He was dead. I don't need Schrodinger's cat. I got Schrodinger's raccoon. Anyway, I'm long this IonQ. I read it on the Wall Street Bets. They said it's the next NVIDIA, and then the NVIDIA guy said it's not the next NVIDIA. And I guess he would know. He would know if it was the next NVIDIA because he made NVIDIA. And he said 30 years from now, we're going to be talking about it. I don't got 30 years. Because this is really what it's all about. If they can't keep selling Ozempic, we've got an issue. Okay, somebody wanted me to look at Novo Nordisk. Let's take on this behemoth, okay? This giant. The Danish giant. The pride of Denmark. Novo Nordisk. Responsible for half our GDP. Novo Nordisk is selling Greenland to Trump. It's a 30 million market cap, pretty low there. I'm shorting RIGETTI. I got to cover a little bit last night. Pre-market, it just dipped for no reason, so I covered a little bit, praying it would go back up and get back in. I just covered a few thousand shares after it dipped inexplicably last night. We're gonna look at Novo Nordisk. Period, the end. Come up with a final decision on Novo. That's it. I'm not Kramer, man. I have to take my time. I wish I could go fast like him. He's got a big brain. I take a different strat. I go a little slower, but maybe more accurate. So, not saying anything bad about Jim, who I admire greatly. Okay, so yeah, Novo slipped from number 2 to AbbVie. AbbVie's now number 2. Biggest enterprise value drug companies. Novo slipped to number 3. J&J sitting at number 4. Merck at 5. Novartis at 6. Etc. Etc. So definitely should be a wake-up call for Novo. All right, the big question on Novo Nordisk is Ozempic IP. Ozempic is going to run out of patent soon. Okay, it's very important to understand that. Do you understand that? Good. Last quarter, the last 4 quarters, Novo sold 71763. We'll just call this DKK over here. I always never use this feature of Excel, but you can make a label. So anyway, we could do equals sum these divided by DKK. 28 billion in revenue, trailing 12 months for mostly semaglutide, okay? So you got 28 billion in revenue that could go generic, but how do generics make all this stuff? And I mean, this accounts for a lot of Novo's valuation, right? It's how much of that is their revenue. Yeah, I was an organ Novo bear a long time ago when they were doing 3D printing, organ printing. Okay, so here it's 270. So yeah, so it's 37 billion in trailing 12 months revenue, US dollars. So 27 out of 41. It's like 3/4 almost of revenue is semaglutide. And semaglutide was invented a long time ago. That was your first short, or it was your first stock as a long. Oh, that's funny. So we're focused on Novo Nordisk right now, okay? Can you guys focus for a minute? This is very important. It's one of the biggest companies in the world. Gross margin's 85%, which means gross margin for Ozempic is, I'm gonna head in the office soon. I was in the office till midnight last night, so. Okay, here's what I want you to think about, okay? Ozempic patent is expired, or it's expiring extremely soon. They have 27 billion in revenue going out the door, okay? 27 billion that could go out the door. But here's the way I want you to think about this. This is a really interesting way to look at it. Look, all the stuff in the pipeline doesn't matter. There's no way they're going to replace 27 billion of revenue, right? So the question is, how fast can generics make $27 billion of product? It's very hard to make Ozempic, or is it? So let's look at that. Because generics don't care how big a drug is. When the patent's gone, the drug's gone. That's how it works, right? And Ozempic isn't special. That's just medicine. Gross margin for the whole business was 85, but it was lower before. It was like 77 before the rise. So you do a small linear combination. If something was 77 before and it's 85 now, you could reason that maybe the margin on Ozempic is really, really high. But let's argue that it's 90% just to be We can even argue it's 85%. So let's look at 80. Let's assume it's 85%, okay? So I hope your guys are still following. So assume it's 85%, and you've got this 200 billion Danish krone, or 27 billion, 27.8 billion, okay? And so this is all about manufacturing. 27.8 billion TTM GLP-1 revenue. Okay, let's say that's at an 85% margin. Usually as a company, what you're interested in is gross profit. But as a generic, what we're interested in is COGS, right? So the COGS, the cost of goods sold, are 4 billion a year, okay? So we assume that nobody can make GLP-1 or semaglutide, in Novo's case, cheaper than Novo. And Novo spends 4 billion a year making it, arguably. I think it sounds like they spend less than that, but generics are the master of making cheap, right? That is what they're good at. So we have to look at some generic companies and ask ourselves, do they have the capacity to do this? And we also have to ask ourselves, what is the PP&E that Novo has accumulated such that a generic company would have to be able to knock it off. Actually, VKTX is actually somewhat of a good solution. If they try to, I didn't even think of that. I don't know if they can get through regulatory. I mean, everyone has a GLP, but I guess if the FTC probably wouldn't be too thrilled with the idea of Novo buying Viking. No, it's hard to prolong patents. It doesn't really work that way. Once the patent's expired, it's expired. Now, they're going to try, but 2026 is your patent expiry. So technically, this is the last year of Novo Nordisk revenue. So now we got to look at, okay, so this is DKK. No, now this is USD, PP&E. All right, so they have $17 billion of plants. Here are the numbers that we care about. 28 billion in revenue, 4 billion in cost of goods. That's probably lower than that though. And 17 billion in property, plant, and equipment. So the question is, can Teva and Mylan make, Mylan is now Viatris. Can Teva and Viatris and Sun, this is like the Super Bowl for them, right? This is the biggest possible generic in a long time. I remember when Lipitor came out, and it was the most exciting generic in the world. I remember when Prozac generic came out, and that was also previously the most exciting generic. Plavix as well. Companies race like this is the one opportunity if you're a generic company. Look at 28 billion, and you don't even have to invent the drug. Imagine just getting $1 billion of that every year just because you're a little cheaper. Every generic company is going to want a piece of this. There's no rule after this on a patent. Now you can see they have some device patents, and the injection device doesn't save you from the generic. Yeah, the other stuff they have doesn't seem like it'll replace Ozempic, and people know Ozempic. People know it works. So yeah, could they come out with a better Ozempic? Sure. And it's going to take time. It doesn't look like they have that, to be frank. And so they need to replace Ozempic with something else. And the reality is doctors will still want to use cheap Ozempic, and insurers will make you take the cheap Ozempic first. And if you can't lose weight with Ozempic, you know, and your insurance says you got to take Ozempic, we're not going to pay for Mounjaro. We're not going to pay for this other stuff. Why would we pay for this other stuff when Teva's making cheap Ozempic? So let's look at Teva. Let's try to understand, can Teva even do this? And people like to look at Teva stock anyway, right? So here's Teva. It's at 21 bucks. They've had a long odyssey, a lot of problems with Teva. At this rate, I'm going to need Ozempic. My gut is expanding rapidly. All right. Yeah, CAGRI doesn't seem to be that good. You know, they're going to probably try to replace some Ozempic with CAGRI, and they have a next gen GLP, but you know, it doesn't look great. It does not look great. Generics are mandatory. Every one of us takes generic drugs. Okay, let's look at Teva. Okay, Teva has 6 billion PPE globally for all their drugs. 5.672 billion PP&E, and that's for the entire company. So this is the point of the bulls, is that if Novo has $17 billion of plants just to make Ozempic, and Teva has $6 billion of plants to make every single drug that they have, is it really realistic that Teva could actually make enough Ozempic to even do it, right? What is the biggest injectable that ever went generic? That's a good question, actually. It's a really good question. And it's a lower priced, higher volume. Teva would have to add $10 billion of CapEx to facilitate an entire generic of Ozempic. I think we can look at what Teva and Viatris are saying to investors to make sure that we understand this, because they have to be thinking about it and talking about it in terms of like what the next opportunity is. So maybe it's even in their SEC filings, but let's see. They're presenting at JP Morgan next week. Press release here. Well, they are going to report in 2 weeks the next earnings, obviously. So I don't know if Teva's trying to be a more branded company or not, but here's generics for them. Oh, don't worry, we're going to look at the Indians next. And Teva has huge amount of plants in India. Okay, well, let's see what this thing says here. This is Victoza generic, which is not semaglutide. But given they were first to file on Victoza, it's kind of telling that, you know, somewhat telling that they did file. Looks like there's some litigation too. We're going to have to, here's some of the litigation. We're going to have to go pull up the dockets in these cases and see. Here they're just arguing to consolidate all of these. Now here are the plaintiffs. You have 𝗷𝗂𝗘𝗢𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔𝗔 Alvogen and Mylan are all well-known entities. Rio, is that Serono? NC Pharma. Okay, I think this is a Brazilian company. Hence Rio Pharma, Rio Biopharma makes sense. Okay, so yeah, no, they are all public, but you have to have Pacer. Let me see if I have a Pacer account here. If anybody does have a Pacer account they're willing to give me, that would be great. But we have to follow the patent litigation and understand it. I think the biggest thing here isn't so much litigation as it is capacity. Sandoz is another. Here he says, clearly this is a space we're intending to go after. The US patents, he's saying the US patents expire in the early 2030s, but that's just not true. So we're gonna have to look at that and see if that's what they're saying. So the way you look at this is Ozempic. And here's the point here. The threat of competition from generic semaglutide, particularly given the extraordinary capital expenditures necessary to deliver billions of injection devices, looks to be 7 years off. Now, you don't actually have to deliver that many injection devices, but this was also the problem with generic Advair. So let's look at Orange Book. So here's Orange Book. Here's the better Orange Book, I guess. And we're just going to type semaglutide in here. And it should give us a list of patents that cover semaglutide. Now, I already put all these in. Well, there's a list of the drugs, so let's pick one. Let's pick Ozempic. Doesn't really matter which one we pick, by the way. They should all have the same patents. And here are the patents. But we already looked at all these. 8114833, 8129, 8536. I guess 857 expired. 868, 892, 910, 913, 9457. So maybe they somehow got to patent it twice. That's typically not what happens in reality, but this is an injection device patent, but really you can use any injectable device. So you can't use their injectable device, but there's nothing stopping you from putting it in your own device. We got an efficient market hypothesis fan here. Yeah, another roller coaster day. Yeah, Orange Book is one of the main tools for this kind of work. Another injection device patent. There are ways to do this. Now, people prefer the device. And when you make a generic, you actually do have to, technically, this is something that's like very technical, but like this is alpha and super important. There are rules around that you actually do have to make something that is similar. So, but the device makers, the generic device makers are going to be very happy. There's a bunch of companies that make these auto injectors. So I'd be pretty, in fact, it'd be a pretty good business is to get into making these for a generic company as cheaply as possible. And in fact, I think some of the generic companies do this themselves too, because they just have razor thin margins. So Becton Dickinson comes to mind. But yeah, let's double check that none of these patents, by the way, they all say they expire in 2026. So, let's look at the one that says it expires in 2033, because otherwise we don't need to look at the 2026 ones because we'll give them 2026. But here's their 2031 acylated GLP patent, but they also have a 2026 acylated GLP-1 patent. So yeah, I know I see the 343 patent, but the 343, the best, I think a really good way to look at it is the Advair market. It's very similar. You have to sell a device and you have to sell a drug. Biosimilars don't have a problem with this because the biosimilar prices don't get hammered that hard. But let's look at these patents. This 2031 acylated GLP versus the 2026 acylated GLP. This is, like I said, a Super Bowl patent case. So here's Jesper Lau, Paul Block, and Thomas Hansen. And they're authors on papers in the literature. So this is the 343 patent, as I would say. And it says here that the adjusted expiration is 2030. So this is a 343 patent. Okay, and we're going to save this. This is super important. We're looking at Novo Nordisk right now. We're not looking at other stocks right now. And so we'll look at this in a second, and then we're going to look at the 122 patent. The 122 patent is the old patent. And the problem is you cannot invent something twice. That is a clear rule in the patent world. You know, the whole point of a patent is you invent it once. And so this patent expires 2026, March 20th. Okay, so here's patent 2. Well, we're trying to figure out if Novo is going to crash or it's a great long. So let's look at the details. Because this is really what it's all about. If they can't keep selling Ozempic, we've got an issue. Okay, market's open, pretty flattish for me at least, but hoping that we get some alpha. Break to watch the action for a minute or two. Long-term side effects? Sides. Well, you usually figure out if a drug has side effects within a couple of years. It's just strange whiz of East to do that. It's patents and papers are for scientists, not for CEOs, unless you directly contributed to the invention or something like that. That was mustache hair, not nasal. I use nail clipper for nasal. Yeah, so evergreening, thank you, Mighty Marshmallow. You know, can you invent something over and over again? Can you repatent something? These are the hopes and prayers of every pharmaceutical company. Some people used to refer to a technique called submarining, which is a patent technique. Okay, I'm going to short a little IonQ. This tiny rally here. I like to see Rigetti down. That's nice. But this crash is coming. Stocks like this can't go up forever. There's no substance to them. I see MicroStrategy and Humor down. That's good. But my main battle is with quantum. Yeah, exclusivity is sort of a regulatory body thing, right? So the patents and regulatory exclusivity are two different things, right? Qubit's not that easy to short, and none of these stocks are trading on their fundamentals. They're all like Farcoin. they're trading based on how hard somebody wants to gamble. That's really it. Hate to say it, it's just true. But these stocks are so subject to head fakes. You know, I think we've called the top for these stocks like 8 times, you know? So it's been a little frustrating because every time you think it's over, they just make new highs for some reason. You're just sitting there like,
partially filled.
IBM is not really that levered to quantum. They don't have enough going on there. Looking a little ugly, but like I said, you know, these investors just they come back and you never know what the bottom is. It's such a cluster. Trade around it a little bit with the short bias. Look at that, IonQ is down now. But this is when you can buy really cheap protection at least. So you can buy some out of the money calls after, you know, once it's in the red like this, you buy some out of the money calls, you can short it, and you know, math should work out that you're protected. Q49.5 calls just got a lot cheaper, for example. And on dips, you buy those, and on rallies, you short it. And you try to make a couple dollars while still being net short. Yeah, AVXL will have its day too, don't worry. It will meet its maker. I put so many better companies in the ground. Yeah, we got the bids. We're going to go forward with the 2 highest bids and sell the accounts to them. So if you get a response, who cares about Wall Street bets? Those guys aren't professionals, man. I'm not going to spend any time thinking about Wall Street bets. Okay, well, there goes the stock right back up. So you got a chance to buy some cheap options. I bought the 52 calls for very little on that dip, so very happy about that. Quantum price action is crazy.